This is Ryan Carlson with HealthJump, and I'm here today with David Steele at Stryker, and this is Digital Health Analytics. But first, David, thank you for being here. Tell me about Stryker before we get into the whole data thing.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So, Stryker is a leading med tech company. It's been traditionally organized around orthopedics, med surge, neurotechnology, and spine. And we have run as a company those different divisions semi-independently. It's a very decentralized organization.
Yep.
But recently, we have decided to form a new entity within Stryker, Digital Robotics and Enabling Technology.
Awesome.
And so this was an acknowledgement that these divisions were all going down in their strategic planning process and their development of their new products, components of digital applications and data analytics needs for those to support those applications, as well as some major investments in robotics, navigation, and other enabling technologies. And rather than have these divisions all invest in the disparately in these solutions, recognize that the world's changing and we need to start thinking about how we can look at enterprise-wide needs.
So are you looking at like a center of excellence for connectivity and robotics and automation then?
Exactly,
Awesome.
Ryan. So we're thinking about that as we call it a shared service center of excellence, where we're going to be working on enterprise-wide solutions, connectivity, device to device, device to cloud, data analytics and advanced analytics, the data science side, application development, and cloud infrastructure management that could support the whole organization.
Right, and I imagine the advantages here is to keep every little division from running down a disparate rabbit hole that could build a lot of technical debt. Is this
Exactly.
like building around like standards around like your data interoperability, maybe like the provisioning of devices, common things that every product would need to go through?
You're right on about that. That's right. So some of it's about standards and creating those standards, and some of it's about building that infrastructure that can support all these organizations, some of the tech blocks that we're going to need, and we can leverage. For example, connectivity of devices. We don't need to have different devices.
A lot of governance.
Yeah,
Lots of governance around that. Yeah.
And the technology itself can be deployed in multiple different Stryker devices. And all that's generating data, so having a common cloud where we're managing that, and then all the privacy and security components that go into all that.
Absolutely.
It doesn't need to be decentralized. We can organize that in a center of excellence.
Yeah, I've had almost, over a decade or more deep in the bowels of Internet of Things and industrial Internet of Things. So what you're saying, it's exciting because we've seen Industry 4.0 and Smart Factory and all of these other places, and med device too, around traceability and quality control, have leveraged a lot of the stuff that came from Internet of Things. And I think it's paved the way to take a lot of that risk that people in healthcare, right? Like med device, you're putting a device in someone's chest. If there's quality control problems, you really want to make sure that it's gone through a lot of steps.
That's right, exactly.
What has me most excited about healthcare is that paved path where the risk isn't so scary for cloud, for wireless, for putting data someplace that's not on a chip with a hardliner. Some of these things that were more or less people objections and not technology challenges.
That's right.
In order to push things forward.
So that's a great observation, and we're in that journey now.
That's great.
We've started that journey. We've got a long ways. It's a journey, so it needs the ways to go. But the idea of understanding the risks we're taking on and getting comfortable with those and putting in the legal agreements that are going to help us manage that risk, all the infrastructure that's also going to mitigate and allow us to make some big bets and accelerate the work and go full bore into this rather than kind of tiptoeing into it.
Yeah.
Those are all parts of this new entity that I was talking about that is thinking about those things so that we can accelerate our pathway forward, especially on the digital side, where you can't be slow.
No.
You need to be
no.
able to move as quickly as some of the startups, even though we've got different levels of responsibility, as you said, when the FDA approval process when you're putting in med devices in people's bodies is a little different than a software and a cloud application, but we're kind of operating in both, so we have to be agile in our approach.
So it sounds like what you're doing is maybe part of a larger digital transformation initiative. So how much of what you're doing is internal, and is there any external components that you're engaging in the market?
So internally is a big part of it.
Absolutely.
When you have a decentralized organization, part of the digital transformation is culture change. That's more important than even the technology investment.
People problems, not engineering problems.
Exactly, Ryan. So we've been working on that. Understanding internally in the strategic planning process where other divisions, what they had planned to do and where we are seeing overlaps and therefore redundancies and therefore opportunities to standardize and build enterprise-wide solutions. So that's an all internal exercise. But the other part you asked about, the external component, is also critical. One of the reasons why we're at this conference at HIMSS today is getting to know externally what some of the best practices are out there, how they're leveraging technology. We're much slower moving in some ways than what's going on in the larger industry, and we can learn so much from that, and we're going to need partners. One of the other recognition is we're not going to be, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here and build everything our own. We don't need to control it.
The non-invented here mentality of a lot of big companies over the years, what I've really appreciated over 20 years is seeing that there is value in finding the best in class, and there's even a lot of value in where you're sitting in that second or third mover advantage. Apple's never the first mover.
Right.
Oh no,
right.
It's a drinking game. I invoked Apple in a technology conversation, so forgive me, please. But the fact is that you get to benefit from a little bit of hindsight where other people have gone. It's maybe a little bit easier if you're talking about people problems and an internal adoption. How much of that do you find leveraging other world experiences, other industries, as a way to onboard people to new ideas?
We have been doing some of that on the other industries, but we've even just been trying to learn from some of the similar type companies in healthcare that has started down the digital transformation pathway. GE Healthcare, for example, has had great success in that. And so spending some time understanding what their pathway was and how they got there and where they leveraged partners and how they did the internal, they're also decentralized type organization. So that would be a good example of trying to learn from others in the space and how they went down this path. Yeah, we're going to do a heavy amount of both as we're planning the future and executing on this roadmap.
So here's an observation I've had at HIMSS thus far, is that the pandemic has caused all growing pains along everyone's digital transformation journey, or just journey to digital in healthcare. It's created a focusing, a lens that amplified some growing pains into mission critical pains. Telehealth. Like clearly we found the weakest links in this ecosystem, and we had to make change. There was this discontinuous leap where leaders had this sobering epiphany that, oh my gosh, the strategic need to change is greater than our ability to adapt to it. So you're looking around for providers that go, we've solved that. So that's where we've interviewed some really cool companies where they're helping address those needs. My question for you is someone who's looking at HIMSS and looking at companies that are talking here, what are the pains that went from growing pains to mission critical things that you feel is both innovative, or what are the things that are catching your attention where you're leaning in at a conference like HIMSS?
Well, so one, we'll call it the transformation from COVID to adopt technology, and therefore some of our big customers, whether they're hospitals or affiliated clinicians, are using technology that is capturing data, and that data is now recognized that can help to support their treatment planning process and their care management. And so those pain points are the pain point of not changing, wanting to stay, this is how we do things, how we've been doing things. That pain point is being addressed through a lot of the technologies out here in the exhibit. And now we're looking at how we can piggyback off of that
momentum,
exactly. One of the good example is in the surgical planning process. There are big opportunities to start utilizing clinical decision support applications and AI-driven insights that's coming off of the mapping of data across the longitudinal continuum of care for a particular acute patient episode. And so some of the technologies, like you've mentioned telehealth, and then some of the applications that are now collecting data on, let's say, the remote patient monitoring side, are now great inputs in building some of those models. And what we're now focusing on, the pain point, is how do you connect the dots from the data across that continuum. We've typically played in the med device space, for example. So we have discrete data coming off of medical equipment, that Stryker equipment, and some of it's very clinically oriented. And mapping that to the hospital provided data and clinician provided data and the patient provided data is the holy grail of opportunities to create in that ecosystem, is to create new insights, new clinical decision support applications that are going to help guide clinicians in making more informed treatment decisions.
So we're getting more data created, but isn't it creating more silos though? I mean, I'm hearing where the trick is. The data's out there, but how do we get it to create that picture?
Yes, exactly. So now that's the new opportunity, pain point or opportunity, right? Is how do you make it more seamlessly able to connect the dots between those disparate data sets. Before the data might not have even been tracked. So you had gaps that you couldn't address easily, but now we're starting to see much more adoption of technology that the gaps are, the data is being collected, you just got to pull it together. So interoperability, right? You see a lot of that in these, some of the themes.
Imagine that, interoperability.
There's a lot of companies trying to solve that opportunity for the industry, but especially for companies like Stryker.
So where do you see the future of addressing that problem? If data acquisition is the challenge, knowing that it's there, where do you from your seat, you have the luxury of actually kind of looking back and see what other people's have been doing. What are your takeaways?
If I had the answer, I would tell you, I'm looking at the solutions around here and trying to evaluate who's got it figured out or who's got a pathway forward and has already been able to prove that they can do this and execute on this in a scalable way. Those are the ones we want to partner with. So that's part of why we're here too, is evaluating different approaches to it. You've heard people talk about tokenizing data across different data sets and then being able to bring that together and doing that in a scalable way. That's something I want to learn more about, how that can be applied to our different use cases. And
I think it's an interesting conversation. IoT is no different in that it's disparate sets of data that are not in any way attributed to me, Ryan Carlson, unless they're at some place, they all live at the same database at the same time. Is that really there? Otherwise, it's just like heating and cooling of a Nest thermostat. It's when I register my Nest thermostat that it brings those things together. But do you really need those things together to create new insights to help people in the aggregate? They don't need to know about me unless they want to market. Healthcare's not about that, right?
You're absolutely right, Ryan. We don't need to know it's Ryan per se to build the models. So we need to know all the things about Ryan. This is that process of then being able to have a digital twin that we're, can leverage.
Exactly, right. And I keep thinking that there's this conversation that needs to be had a bit more around idea of health metadata. There's anything that's the protected health information when you're talking about PHI, and that needs to be sacrosanct, right? It needs to be kept in rest or in motion only in the right instances for the right authorized users. But there's a significant amount of medical or clinical metadata that is created by doctors who are inputting information.
Exactly.
How is it that we can start leveraging that metadata that it's never identifiable in the first place? You don't have to redact it with the marker. So I think this is the conversation we should all be having more of, is what do we do with data that can't be re-identified because it was never identifiable in the first place? And I think living in there is a lot of those different pieces, right? Because privacy, security, and regulation, the minute our names, addresses, phone numbers touch it, we have to be extra careful, right? No one questions that.
Yep.
So
That's
how do we remove that from the conversation for AI, for aggregated data? And it sounds like this is exactly what this Center of Excellence is attempting to do. You have health metadata all over the place.
Yep.
And it's how do we bring it together in a meaning to, what is it, data scientists? I mean, who is it that you're having?
Well, they're one of
the
initial users of this, so they can build the models that are going to drive clinically relevant decision support applications in the future, or built sometimes into our products as they're using them.
Sure.
They're in the operating room, and you're getting guidance on what's the right approach to do this particular type of procedure. That's where it gets really exciting. But you're absolutely right. So we're trying to think about this. We're not going to solve that issue. Somebody in this industry or multiple companies are trying to solve that. We want to make sure we're working with those companies to piggyback off of that effort and take advantage of their ability to unlock, in essence, the value of the data by taking off the identification issue off the table.
Thank you for sharing this Stryker story and how you're, again, congratulations on bringing the Center of Excellence together and what you're doing. I think it's an excellent first step on taking a whole route of independent squirrely paths that can lead into dark places or big wins that no one ever else gets to benefit from. So kudos to you guys.
Thanks, Ryan.
I think that's fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
And good luck on your journey on getting all the right pieces of the puzzle together to inform what you're doing next.
Yep, it's going to be a journey. I appreciate it.
It is a journey. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Ryan.